Roxanne in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Roxanne, what's up?
So often we say that the loss of jobs, the outsourcing of jobs, it is really unnecessary because corporations have the lowest actual tax rate here in the United States. We don't have the highest, the way that the righties always say. But I've heard that there is a provision that that corporations need to pay taxes on their overseas profits, whereas other countries don't require that. Is that true? Is that a legitimate argument? And would that be something that we could address to kind of make the outsourcing less attractive?
Yeah, it's true and it's not true. Here's how it works. Let me just first talk about American companies. If you've got a company in the United States, like Apple is a great example because they're one of the biggest malefactors in this. They've got, I believe, about $100 billion stashed overseas. So they make a phone in China that, let's say, costs them $50 to make, and then they sell it in the United States for, let's say, $800. So there's a $750 profit in that. They can choose. They've got the Chinese division and they got the American division. They can choose to sell that phone to themselves from China to the United States for $50 or for $800, $850. And so what they do is they sell it to themselves for $850 so that the Chinese division makes that $650 profit or whatever it is. I'm forgetting my math now, a $750 profit. And thus the profits stay overseas. When that is being done simply to manufacture products for the American marketplace and do it in a way that keeps the profits offshore, because they could just as easily have sold it to the U.S. division for the cost of manufacturing, maybe with a small profit, sell it for $75. But then the profit when that phone gets sold, the $700 profit, would end up on the books of the American company rather than the foreign company, or it would end up as an American sale or an American profit and would be taxed. This is just playing games with the tax code. And this is what most American companies are doing. Now, the other side, the other extreme of the spectrum is where you've got a company, for example, Toyota. Toyota manufactures cars in the United States for the American market. They created a separate corporation, Toyota USA or whatever it's called, that is majority owned by Toyota in Japan. And so profits flow back through via dividends and that kind of thing. But they make cars in the United States, they sell cars in the United States, and they pay taxes in the United States on the cars that they make. And so, if American companies were making things overseas, and in some cases they do. Ford, for example, has a large auto manufacturing operation in Germany, and they pay $54 an hour to their workers. So when you've got a company that's making things overseas for an overseas market, I don't think anybody would have any problem with them keeping those profits in that overseas market and growing that and putting that into the factory and paying people well and all that kind of thing. But it's this game playing that we allow in the United States. There's a couple other countries that do it. The UK allows it to happen too. Most European countries don't. Most European countries say to their divisions, if you're going to make money offshore for products that have some involvement with our country, particularly sale in our country, you're going to have to pay taxes here. You get the distinction?
Absolutely, and I'd heard of that before, but I didn't apply it to that comment. And it's, I think, really interesting how, a statement of fact can be so misleading.
Yes. Yeah, and we do have the highest tax rate in the developed world at 40%, but the effective rate, the actual rate that corporations pay, even when they're paying the very most possible, is typically around 20, 21, 22%, which is in line with the rest of the world. I think, I agree with Jack Kennedy back in 1960 when he was debating Richard Nixon, and the top tax rate at that point in time on rich people was 91%. And Jack Kennedy said, hey, I'm from a family that pays that kind of, makes that kind of money, and we don't pay 91%. Nobody pays 91%. There's been so many holes drilled in the tax code that the effective rate is actually around 45 or 50%. So he wanted to lower it to 74% and close the loopholes, which would actually increase the amount of taxes that rich people were paying. And he died in 63. Lyndon Johnson passed that legislation in 64, and it actually increased the amount of money coming into the federal coffers. Now, the Reaganites point to that, and they say, oh, look, after LBJ lowered the top tax rate, federal income increased. You know, and they think it's because he magically lowered the taxes. Well, no, it's because he closed all the loopholes. The flip side of this is what Sam Brownback did in Kansas. He said, oh, we're going to do what Jack Kennedy did. We're going to do Reaganomics. We're going to lower the tax on rich people, particularly the Koch brothers who just happen to live in Kansas. We're going to lower the tax on rich people by hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's going to increase our revenues. And it didn't increase the revenues because he didn't do what Jack Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson prescribed, which is close the damn loopholes so people actually pay their taxes. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. And
okay.
Just probably the strangest thing in all that story is that the Koch brothers choose to live in Kansas.
Yeah, there you go. Although I'm sure they have mansions all over the place. Roxanne, thanks a lot for the call. Great to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening to AM 1350 there in Albuquerque.